Call to order this city council meeting for February 27th. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Armstrong,
Here.
Councilmember Rubio. Here. Councilmember Burrows.
Here.
Vice Mayor Perkins.
Here.
And Mayor Hudson.
Here.
Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item, please.
Item 3, announcements. 3.1, changes and additions to the agenda. We have none this evening. Item 3.2, if you would like to speak under public comment or regarding an agenda item, please fill out a speaker card and bring it and submit it to the city clerk. Item 4, public comment.
Okay, public comment is open. Now is the time for anyone in the audience to address the city council on any item not on tonight's agenda or a request. I guess that had to be in writing though, to pull something from the consent calendar or on section 6 of tonight's agenda, which I believe is a special presentation. Do we have any speaker cards?
I do not have any speaker cards.
And I gather no one online. Any written?
We have no public comment.
Okay, public comment is closed. Next item, please.
Item 5, consent calendar.
Okay. Anyone on the council want to pull an item from the consent calendar? They're generally routine in nature, so they're acted upon with one single action.
So I move the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Motion for Rose to approve, second Marisol. Are we all in? It looks like 5-0 to me. Looks like consent calendar is good for the evening. Next item, please.
Item 6, special presentation. 6.1, presentation from the Contra Costa County Clerk Recorder's Office by Kristen Connolly, the County Clerk Recorder.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
And well done. Just 7 days out from my first presidential primary in this job, and I am speaking to you before 7:05. Well done. Thank you. You have a very
Even better than the mayor's conference.
even better than the mayor's conference. You are very busy as council members and have much important business. So thank you for giving me some time on your agenda, especially at the beginning. So I stand before you in my second year in this job, still in my first term, and Mayor Hudson and I know Councilmember Armstrong were at the mayor's conference recently, as were you, Vice Mayor Perkins. But hopefully you're still going to get something new out of this presentation. And also I'm here to just inform the public, because the one thing that was emphasized to me over and over and over again from my colleagues, because as you might imagine, being new in the role, I made a point of meeting my counterparts around the Bay and across the state. I like that I have a text relationship with the dean of this role, which is actually Dean Logan, my counterpart in LA County. They just really emphasized how complex this presidential primary is, which is why I wanted to get in front of all city and town councils in Contra Costa. And I finished that task before you this evening, before the primary, last but certainly not least, representing such an important piece of the county. And also you have the distinction, although it is not you as a city council, but the San Ramon Valley Unified School District did call for a special election on May 7th. So in fact, we have 2 elections going on for your community right now. So I start and I end every presentation with my contact information, and I am glad that people actually use it. I have gotten several follow-up emails and calls from this. So the first and last slide has my contact information. But I do mention what our mandated responsibilities are anytime I give a presentation. So we are responsible for conducting elections. Our department is organized in 2 divisions. The elections division maintains the voter rolls, makes sure all Contra Costa eligible citizens have the information that they need. Our best estimates are that 90% of eligible adults in Contra Costa County are registered. It's not evenly distributed, and we certainly want to continue to work with our under-registered communities and have some plans for that. Our clerk recorder division actually has more full-time employees than our elections division and was responsible for the vital records and recorded property transactions for the county in terms of, so we do important work. It's where the recorder part of my job comes in. But if you're like me and you were born in Contra Costa, we can get you a birth certificate in just a matter of moments. So, but on to some details. I am proud to be at the helm of a very well-established, innovative elections division that has received national distinction. We did receive we were asked to be a part of the Center for Elections Excellence inaugural cohort, and we're just one of 16 jurisdictions across the country to be a part of that. And it comes with $2 million in funding that we've been able to use to supplement our cyber investments, to do disaster recovery preparation. Also, starting tomorrow, we'll actually have a security guard at our office. That's been kind of a long standing because it looks like the county is going to provide that starting July 1 in the new fiscal year. I mean, nothing's been decided yet, but all indications are that that's headed that way. So we're doing very basic things with that funding. And we're also just at this starting stages of a campaign to restore trust in elections. And we really do care deeply about making sure that we're communicating the actual information about how our elections work so that we can answer every question and that we can build that trust with our community. We've also did receive a National Democracy Award for leading the 11 county Bay Area elections coalition. San Francisco is not a part of that. I want to change that. But our purpose primarily is to fight mis, dis, and malinformation. But we're continuing to come up with ways that we can use our common media market to serve voters better. So for example, we came up with 2 pieces of collateral, which we've shared with all the county clerks to get out to council members. But in early 23, in some of our planning, we decided that voters would want to know, how do I know my vote counts? And why does it take so long? So, and the QR codes here link to additional information. But for example, how do I know my vote was counted? Links people to the ballot tracks information that the Secretary of State has. And my husband was very excited. He texted me his message to say that his vote had been received and counted, and he was all excited. So people like getting that communication, and we want to make sure all voters know that that's available to them. So just a snapshot of the county as a whole. We're just under 710,000 registered voters for this election. In general, since 2020 and the onset of the COVID pandemic, when California began the process of mailing a ballot to every voter, between 90 and 95% of our ballots in Contra Costa are received as vote-by-mail ballots. Half of them come in through our 40 secure drop boxes, including, I know that we'll have 6 for this special election in the San Ramon Valley Unified School District across the area down here in the southern part of the county. We have 40 of those drop boxes countywide, and about half of that comes back through the U.S. Postal Service. I will tell you, just so that right now, for the election, which we're just 7 days away from right now, the vast majority of our ballots have come in through the mail so far. Fewer have come in. It's not 50-50 currently as of the voting, but I think that's where we will end up. We're a lean and mean office. We're authorized for just 32 full-time employees. We were 30, but 2 more have been authorized thanks to some Measure X funding. And so we'll be able to do additional outreach to underserved and language minority communities. And we're excited about that. By comparison, Santa Clara County has just 400,000 more registered voters, but they have 3 times the full-time staff. So elections is staffed very differently depending on where you are. But the reason that
What constitutes the major difference in those extra people? I mean, you'll
yeah.
50% more voters, but you get more than 100% more staff.
Well, I mean, and I think, the scale, I mean, for example, I can just speak to how our office is organized, right? So we have a voting systems unit, we have an election day operations unit, and we have a voter and candidate services unit. My suspicion is that they and they certainly have a much bigger communications and outreach arm. So I have benefited from the fact that they actually have a podcast that they put out. Like, they have a lot more communications people, but my sense is that they're sprinkled throughout their different units, especially in the operations space in terms of how you're processing vote by mail ballots and that kind of stuff. So, and I would argue they probably then staff up as seasonal staff a little bit more slowly than we do, depending on the election. And they're great. And I love this. I love Santa Clara County. Shannon Bushy, my counterpart there, is fantastic. To talk about San Ramon a little bit. You have 50,000, just over 50,000 registered voters, representing 7.1% of the county. We have 43 different precincts serving city voters. I won't read the partisan breakdown off this slide, but I did want to highlight, you actually have a higher than average for the rest of the county number of no party preference voters at 28.9. The rest of the county is about 20%. And so what I've been doing, and we've been trying to communicate with those no party preference voters. We sent them all a postcard. We didn't get very many of them back. They were mailed in the middle of December, not faulting voters. But the deadline for hearing back from folks to give them a ballot was February 20th. So we're past that as I stand before you today. But the most important message I want to give to all of you is that we absolutely, so there are plenty of San Ramon no party preference voters who got a ballot without presidential candidates on it, and they might want to vote presidential candidates. It's not too late. We're in the process. All that they would need to do is be served in person. And they can do that a couple of different ways. There's in-person early voting at the United Methodist Church in Alamo that's open starting Friday, March 1st, Saturday, March 2nd, and Monday, March 4th. So that is coming. So people can get served and they can get the ballot that they need. And my office in Martinez is also open every weekday, 9 to 5 until and through election day, if they want to be served. So how does that work? Let me just back up a little bit. Oh yeah, so there are 3 parties that are allowing those no party preference voters to cast what's called a crossover ballot. So that would be the Democratic Party, the Libertarian Party, or the American Independent Party. Those 3 parties allow someone to stay unaffiliated with their party, but they can vote for presidential candidates. They can't vote for party committee members, but they could vote for presidential candidates. There's 3 other parties that require you to re-register. So if you're a no party preference voter and you want to vote in the Republican primary, the Peace and Freedom primary, or the Green Party primary, you have to register as a member of that party. And the way you do that is by going to one of the 147 polling places set up to serve Contra Costa voters on election day or at any of those early voting options. So every voter, even if they didn't have presidential candidates on it, on their ballot, they got a voter information guide that has their polling place listed on it. We have 147 polling places that will be serving voters of Contra Costa. And all that they would need to do is complete what's the conditional voter registration. And think about the LA Lakers as you think about this. It is an envelope that has a yellow highlight around the edges of it. And that voter would put their conditional voter registration into a purple bag. And that means that they're allowed to, up to and in through election day, re-register for one of those 3 parties and cast a ballot. And our poll workers will be trained and able to help them. And I'm excited. It's just 7 days away. Been waiting for this. So just in case it's better if you're a visual person, as we stand here on this timeline, we are at E-7. We are just 7 days away from election day itself on March 5th. And again, so we've already passed the online voter option to re-register in time. But again, at the 5 early voting sites and on polling places on election day and at our office in Martinez, we are able to take care of people who want to re-register. And of course, if you're not a no party preference voter, or you are, and you just want to vote your ballot, just mail it in or drop it into Dropbox. So unfortunately, our returns so far are running lower than expected. So the most important thing I want to convey to all of you is just to vote. We just need you to vote.
And the drop boxes are open now.
The drop boxes have been open since February 5th, and they will not close until 8 o'clock on election day. And our staff, we have people in vests driving cars with California plates that we rented. We didn't want to have any out-of-state plates on our rental vehicles to be circulating things. We're trying to think of every detail possible to make sure that everybody knows who is getting their ballots and everything is safe and secure. So how could you help? It'd be great if you can communicate with people every day between now and Tuesday to make sure that they vote and reinforce this important election information. And it's a little, the crossover ballot situation is a real burden on voters. And I think it's partly why the returns are low. We're on track to have turnout that's closer to 2012 than 2016 or 2020. We had hoped it would be closer to that 50% threshold rather than lower than that. So with your help, maybe we will bend the curve and increase the turnout. But in general, it's too late for this election, but in general, I would love your help to communicate to young people, to encourage them to become student poll workers of the places in the entire county. San Ramon is actually where we have quite a number of student poll workers, so keep up the good work. And if you have a youth commission, we would love to send speakers from our staff about making that happen. If you could just consider yourselves, I would love to deputize you as ambassadors for year-round voting registration. It just is something we have we have residents become citizens year-round, and so want to make sure that we're registering people. And also 16 and 17-year-olds can pre-register to vote, and then they turn 18. I need to figure out a way to send them a birthday card. I'm convinced that will make everyone a voter, but we'll see. We have worked hard, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, to collaborate with law enforcement. One of the things I talked about a lot during the campaign was preparedness for man-made and natural disasters. And part of that is making sure that we are prepared for any scenario that might come our way. It's a best practice to collaborate between elections officials and law enforcement year-round. So I've been so grateful to Sheriff Livingston for the time he has given me on a one-on-one basis and for the staff that he has dedicated to various issues. We got more to do, but he did help facilitate my ability to speak to the Contra Costa Police Chiefs Association last fall and has been willing to disseminate information. And we have a really strong emerging partnership. So if you can reinforce that, what the safety messages are, because the bottom line is all the protections under the California Election Code that apply to polling places apply to those secure drop boxes. And so it's important that people know you can't do any electioneering within 100 feet. We have to keep every piece of the election needs to be kept safe. And honestly, if you're in law enforcement, there's a lot of folks who don't actually even know there are election related crimes. So one of the things I did was to send out the updated law enforcement guide, which is also the Secretary of State is putting this out too through the Attorney General, but I wanted to get this out locally to Contra Costa. So there's a 6-page document that talks about some of the key items, including legislative changes that were made last year. And this is something that's assembled by the Nonpartisan Committee for Safe and Secure Elections, which is full of retired law enforcement and retired elections officials working together. So just backing up for a second. We do anticipate that it's going to be, the Secretary of State's office is going to be highlighting Freedom Summer. It's been 60 years since Freedom Summer and so many important things that happened in the civil rights movement, including Fannie Lou Hamer's famous, "I'm so sick and tired of being sick and tired." Dr. Shirley Weber, the Secretary of State, is hoping that will inspire more Californians to vote. So we will be pushing out those messages. We will also be supporting California High School Voter Education Weeks, the last 2 weeks in April and the last 2 weeks of September. If you want to participate on campus with our election staff going to the high schools in the area, let me know. We'd love to have you. More the merrier. Again, we're a little and mighty team, and I think it would be really impactful for young people in the community to see their elected officials. You can check out everything on our website at contracostavote.gov. We've also set up TikTok accounts, and we do have Instagram. You can use those QR codes because we're really interested in engaging young people. The trend in turnout is not what we want to see. And granted, these are midterm elections, but where we saw an increase between 2014 and 2018, there was a real decrease in the turnout. This is California-wide, but Contra Costa is a microcosm of California in so many ways. So we're really hoping to reach young people, and young people are getting their news on TikTok, among other places. Mother of 2 teenagers, can confirm. So I want to just sort of leave it there. But one thing I did bring a little show and tell that I'm happy to leave with the clerk. This is a Secretary of State's publication, The Life Cycle of a Ballot. I'm happy to leave it with you so that, because it's just really important that the public understand what happens from the time we design a ballot to the time it gets mailed to you and how all of that works, especially because you are in the middle of 2 elections. And so what I did want to do is just take a minute and go back to that timeline of
Can you
what it
stop
means.
on that last one for a minute. This drives me crazy. I want you to see it. Skip the line, vote for Early. You know, one of the candidates' name is Early.
Oh, didn't know that. I'm getting rid of that. I don't want to be engaged in electioneering. So, my assistant did that, not to throw her under the bus. She's fantastic. I
Wait a
love
minute,
her.
You're not talking about Rosa.
So, no, she retired, but she is going to be the inspector at one of our polling places in Kensington. She was our last one, our 147th, did
Please
confirm.
tell her I said hi.
Getting special training. Many people know her. She is wonderful. So for the San Ramon Valley Unified School District election, you need to modify these dates. So election day is May 7th. So we are actually in the process of finalizing the voter information guide that will be going out to voters at E-40. So 40 days out from May 7th. So you can see we are really going to be counting votes for this election as we are getting information out the door to San Ramon voters, San Ramon Unified School District voters. And again, we're going to be mailing ballots for the May 7th election 29 days out. And then again, 15 days out from May 7th is the last day to register online for that. Now, granted, thankfully, it's not a primary, so it's not as complex as this one. And I did want to note, it is a mail ballot election. There will be no in-person voting. So that's what's different for the May 7th San Ramon Valley Unified School District. It's all under the California Election Code. There is a day in May that, you can pick for where you're just mailing people a ballot. So that's what's going to happen. So we'll still have 6 secure drop boxes. All of that information will be made clear in the voter information guide that our office sends. And we have added that election to our website. And so I just wanted to convey that both those things are happening at the same time. We anticipate that we will be certifying the election results from our primary on March 28th. So we will be accepting ballots through March 12th if they're postmarked by March 5th. Take some time to vote. That's part of the life cycle of the ballot. We spend more money on checking signatures than any other single line item in the election budget. And so we take all that very seriously. And with that, I'd just be happy to open it to questions.
3 questions.
Sure.
3 I think of right now. Military overseas ballot.
Yeah.
Can they be received after the E+7?
Can those be, I believe that the drop dead date truly applies to them as well. We start earlier with them. And we also have this cool thing called RAVBM, which is remote access vote by mail. So we do, for the voters who we can reach via email, we can give them a secure link to access their ballot. I want to be clear, it's not internet voting. The overseas or military voters needs to print that ballot and get it back to us physically, but it is great that we have the opportunity to give them a secure electronic way to access their ballot because that cuts the time off. But the what's called the UOCAVA, that's the military and overseas voter. It was enshrined first in the Help America Vote Act, which passed in 2002. So we have to get those things in the mail E-40. So they're ahead of, it can start sooner and it's no later than E-40. There's a very specific window about that.
How do you ensure the integrity and security of the vote counting machines?
Yeah, great question. So we have Dominion voting systems.
Great.
Since 2018, the county has used Dominion voting systems. We take the security of our tally room incredibly seriously. So much so that even though my name is on the building and I am the registrar of voters, I do not have the code, nor do I have access to the tally room, for example. I don't have a reason to. Only the people that are responsible for those processes and for that room have access to that. And no one is ever in there alone. That's another piece, because no one is ever alone with ballots. So we take the tallying room. That equipment is not connected to the internet. We test it again. We do public logic and accuracy testing and open our doors to the public, and we make sure everything's calibrated. We're also participating in the Secretary of State's election night reporting process, which will make it faster and easier for us on election night, but they put us through the paces. And so there's all kinds of practice that we do. And so it is not hackable. It is not something that can be messed with at all. And we control that by who has access to the room itself.
Okay, and how do you ensure that the software that was created to run the machine is in fact counting the ballots correctly?
That's what logic and accuracy testing does. What we do is we match up what gets put through the machines with a hand tally. And then on the back end, so that's before the tallying begins for the election, we have a 1% manual tally that happens the day after the election. I'll be drawing precincts randomly about what that 1% will look like, and we check our work. But you should know, there's only 3 voting systems in California that are certified to do this. And it's very regimented, the version you use, what happens with updates. It's all very, very highly regulated in order to make sure that everything is working the way that it should. Great questions.
They were good, not great.
I had a question, and you may have answered it up front, or maybe it's in your podcast, but, there's nothing we can do about it at this point, but why all this crossover voting and
That's
changing your registration and things like, that seems awfully complicated. You
Yeah.
don't have a good turnout with it.
Yeah.
Why are we doing that in the first place?
Yeah.
Whose good idea was this?
Under California election code, the political parties themselves get to decide
Yeah.
how that works. So there's separate election code for each of the political parties. And we only found out on October 23rd what the rules were going to be for each party. So the parties themselves could choose to align and work with the legislature to make that so. But I'm not a policymaker in this job. It's my job to administer the elections per the election code. And so the buck stops in Sacramento for that one.
Yeah, it just seems to be so much easier if everybody got sent, even the no party preference people, everybody got sent,
Yeah,
something.
no, that's why the primary is so much more complex than the general election, because we have 8 different party type ballots.
Yeah.
And then we have everything is in 3 languages. All of our elections materials is in English, Spanish, and Chinese. And so that right there can give you a sense of why we have so many ballot types.
Anyone
So
else?
you mentioned that each of the vote is verified for the signature manually.
Mhm.
Is there any reason why technology is not being implemented yet?
So it's interesting. I've taken 7 of the 12 classes you need to take in order to become a certified elections official through our national association in collaboration with Auburn University. And in my first in-person class that I did in February in Pasadena, I got to spend time with folks from a jurisdiction from Denver, Colorado, and they use a computer program to do that signature verification. And they're very frustrated because the way that it's set is that it only validates 25% of the signatures because of the fidelity that's required of that program. So they talk about how much time they're spending with human eyeballs, and they're known for being a very innovative office with technology. And that's not the only reason we don't use it, but I just use that as an example that we're convinced that this is the best, most cost-effective part of the process, the way to do it. We have to account for the difference between signatures on a touch screen with your finger that are in our system versus what it looked like when I turned 16 at the DMV in Concord and got my first driver's license, right? And then also signatures change over time. But I will say we have deployed a new pilot project for this election that will allow people to use their phone to cure their signature with us. So for example, some people they forget to sign their ballot. We send them a certified letter. It says, you forgot to sign your ballot. So instead of having to mail us back a form, which very few people would do, they're able to text a certain number, which will set up this back and forth with them. And then ultimately you can end up swearing to an affidavit and giving us a signature that we can compare with the file. So you get 2 chances. We'll send you 2 certified letters to cure your signature. And then if you don't do that and don't help us out, we'll send you a third that says, unfortunately, your vote didn't count. Please update your signature with our office. The most common reason that people's signatures need curing is forgetting to sign. But sometimes the signature just really doesn't match and we have to explore further what's going on there. We do have the capacity, if more than one voter lives in a household, the first thing we check is, did the voters swap envelopes? And so we are able to do that. And actually, the former clerk for whom our building is named did that once with his husband. And so kind of famously, not on purpose, but people give Steve a hard time about that.
So now, if youth want to participate as poll workers or as volunteer work, whom they need to reach out to?
You can just call our office, 925-335-7800, or look at this, what's always on the first and last slide. You can just reach out. You can email me or call me. I probably should actually mention, you should be looking for this Trust in Elections campaign. This is dated. It was launched a little bit earlier than last Thursday, but we're trying to build trust in elections. We're testing some messages to see what appeals to the public, right? So try two-step verification, try 7-step verification in terms of all the rules we have to follow. You know, your vote counts. We know we checked it 4 times. Those are going to be kind of the thing. And then we're going to be testing some visuals to go along with some of those messages to see what appeals. We're trying to really do everything we can to instill trust in the elections process. But you might have had one more question.
Yeah, one more question is there any work going on to reduce the counting days so that we can publish our results much earlier than the current?
Yeah. No, there's no question. I was at a national conference in January in Washington, D.C., and a freshman member of Congress and former Secretary of State from Florida was certainly throwing shade at California that we accept ballots for fully 7 days after Election Day. And the truth is, we do it as fast as we can under the current election code. The only way to speed things up would be to reduce the number of days that we accept ballots for. And again, I'm not a policymaker, I'm an elections administrator. So that's, I do think there will be additional information put out on election night that explains to people that just because we have 100% of our in-person voting, that is not 100% of the vote, right? I think it's important to tell the public that how much of the vote it represents. On election night, when we release results after the polls close, that will only represent 2 things. It will represent in-person voting, both at the regional early voting sites and on election day, those 147 polling places, and everything received in our office through Saturday. What comes in after Saturday, we will have not had time to process and count. So the majority, more than I expect, it'll be more like 60% of the vote will be outstanding. And so it's important to, again, it just depends on turnout. I'd love your help in bending the curve. But it's important to convey to the public that because we get most of our ballots the day before, the day of, and the 2 days after the election, it's those days after the election night reports where we get more robust. Now, in lots of races, it confirms what happened on election night, but the votes are the votes and every vote counts. And as you know, in the November 22 general election, there were 2 city council races that were so close, they went to recount. One was originally a tie and ultimately was decided by a 3-vote margin. One was originally a 3-vote margin and went to a 4-vote margin. I gave an interview today with KQED and talked about how that trend will continue as more jurisdictions go to district elections. And there's, smaller units of government.
Yeah, I ultimately won by 72 votes, but I was behind by 300 votes on election night.
I promise I did not know that, Vice Mayor Perkins, before coming in here, but it's like you were a plant. So yes, every vote counts.
So how often will you be reporting results?
The intention is to report results. There will be multiple reports that go out on election night itself, but we will put out our best guess is that we'll be able to put out our final results on election night between 11 and midnight. We have a 2-card 17-inch ballot. So that's our best analysis based on what we have. But I do anticipate that we will be putting out results then later in the week on certainly on Friday, but I do anticipate there being a batch on Wednesday and Thursday. But there will definitely be election night results and there will be results on Friday.
Let
So
me
one
stay
more
with
thing.
Sridar's question before we get
Oh, yeah.
too far off, where he asked about how do you apply to be a poll worker or something like.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah. Our
Uh,
election,
What I didn't hear is that if simply because you apply from San Ramon doesn't mean you're going to get to work at San Ramon.
correct.
And you should probably let the person know if you're running for office.
Yeah,
You might not
absolutely.
want to be
There,
working at that poll.
there are certain requirements that we have in terms of preventing people that are overtly political from being involved. We have a code of conduct that we stand by, and we have to make sure that all of that is followed. I will say, we don't have the same amount of signups. Ideally, we're getting community members from like that each of those 147 polling places are staffed by community members from that community. And so, but we are happy to move people around if we need to plug them in. And so, yeah, calling our office and starting that process. Again, we're going to need a lot of help for November.
One more last question. So if you want to purchase any of the data or anything, it need to be through email or in person?
You need to show up in person, but a new innovation is that you can pay with a debit or a credit card.
Okay, that's good, because it used to be check or you need to be in person, so.
Well,
can
you
do it
still need to be in person
Okay,
because you still need to sign and confirm the purposes for which you're using that data. But we can allow you to use a debit or a credit card for a small processing fee.
In the past, I was able to mail a form with my check and sign. an
You can
affidavit.
still do that.
Okay.
so there is no online option though, like. you cannot
No.
do it on-
Working on it.
Okay, working on it. Okay.
Have heard it from lots of people, especially if you put yourself out in front of any of the political parties from really people that are talking about campaigning. That's one of the most frequent requests I've heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just had a question. As far as like these crossover ballots, can poll workers remind, if they see that they're a voter who qualifies for a crossover ballot, can they inform the voter that they have that option available to them?
Our process, Councilmember Rubio, our process involves, we are very careful about the words that our poll workers use
Mhm.
and the script that we give them. And it's very much about confirming who they are. That's the interaction with the poll pad if they're coming to the poll in person. And it's that, and also there's a couple new laws that we're implementing this year. One of which is you can turn in your vote by mail ballot without the envelope. So we have to process that. It's way more complex than you would think. But also, if, for example, I were to show up at a polling place and I'm trying to vote my husband's ballot, that's not my ballot. That's part of the confirmation process of like, oh, you're trying to vote a Republican ballot, but you're registered as a Democrat or vice versa, or whatever it is. And so what happens is that the voter confirms that that's what they want to do, that you are registered as, but we've prepared them that voter might be like, oh, I didn't know I was a member of the American Independent Party. I want to do this. And so they know. So it's not that we offer, you have this potpourri of buffet options. Like we don't present it as like a la carte, but it's the way that it's scripted under the code is that it's a confirmation that this is correct and that's what they'd like to do. And if they say, no, actually, this is wrong, right? Because there are some concerns that people used automatic motor voter at the DMV and the person is actually a partisan, but they're registered as no party preference because the drop downs at the DMV. Our poll workers will be prepared to help those people either re-register or to cross over, depending on what they ask for. But it has to be driven by the voter, and we have the materials to explain it. But it's important that we not be perceived as electioneering or putting our thumb on the scale of one particular party or the other.
Right.
But it's about clarifying with the voter what they want.
But what if they aren't aware that they could request it? How do you clarify that?
I mean, it's a good question, but it's also, I guess I would pitch it back to you. How do we know that they don't want that? I mean, the best way to ask is like, you're registered as a no party preference voter. Is that correct? And then they could say, yeah. But they also, if they go into the booth with their ballot and they don't see presidential candidates, our poll workers are there to answer questions. And so, right. And all the special people who sometimes inspire the poll workers to call the command center and just say, oh, hey, we had a voter start to vote. She decided they want to they want to actually change ballots. So we need to, cancel that one, issue another one. We're preparing for all those scenarios in 2 hours of training. But, so yeah, so that's kind of how I would, I mean, it's an important question to think about. And
It
it's that level of detail that we talk about amongst ourselves, right? There's 58 of us that have this job around California. And so we confer all the time about how do you handle this Public Records Act request? Or what do you think about this? And I'm getting questions about this or would like to do this. And so it's so collaborative. But we care a lot about getting it right. And for example, we just got our updated California election code books. And so often we answer things by going to the code.
Right, right. And I think like the only concern, I mean, so that is a difficult question. How do you do that without like appearing to be electioneering?
Mhm.
Because, but at the same time, I think, I'm sure you guys have had this discussion where, say it's somebody where English isn't their primary language,
Mhm.
they're more likely, just to be perhaps not asked when they actually need that information. They may not even know it's something they can do. And so it's an interesting kind of situation.
Yeah, no, I mean,
And a perfect one.
and
at
language
best.
access is always such an important topic to be thinking about. How can we do better and how can the materials be meaningful and how can we better serve voters? That's why I asked for more help from the Board of Supervisors. I mean, that was largely fundamental about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, thank you. I
Sure.
appreciate it.
Sure.
You said something earlier about California high school. Did you say high schools or California high school?
That's right. Double meaning here in San Ramon. For you all, it means both. No, so it is technically California High School Voter Education Weeks twice a year. The last 2 weeks of April, the last 2 weeks of September, and we fan out to dozens of high schools around the county. And that's what I'm asking all these city council members. If you would like to join our staff on campus at Cal High or San Ramon Valley High, or Monte Vista, depending on your, preference, or all three, or none of the above. But I was just trying to, my brain keeping up with what are the high schools down here. Or Doherty Valley. Let me not forget Doherty Valley High School, where my daughter's dance recitals are every June. So then just contact our office and we'll be happy to connect with you.
I had one last one too. I would go out every election and go grab a lot of registration cards and pass them out while I was out campaigning.
Mhm.
Do you allow that?
There are lots.
Stop after me.
Actually, there's a special plaque up in our office about, I'm kidding.
No,
So-
there might be.
No, Mayor Hudson, just in jest. You're my very last city council presentation and it's 7 days out from the election. So we do, for example, we partner with the League of Women Voters about going out and registering people to vote. We make sure that there's forms at every city hall around the county. And yes, there are conditions that you need to follow if you are registering people to vote, but it is absolutely legal and okay to help. That's on the slide. I said, please be an ambassador for voter registration. And I'm happy to help you do that and make sure you have the information you need.
I got one last one. Since they're not going to ask questions about election, I'm going to ask you what I asked you in the mayor's conference.
Oh,
You do weddings
yes.
and it doesn't have to be a mayor to perform weddings, correct?
So this came up in the context. I am the
Came up for
commissioner
me.
of civil marriages. So we have two programs. Like we have an ability, like we will register someone and deputize them for a fee at our office, or either for just a quick 24 hours or for a longer period. And what I promised the mayor's conference is that I would look into what it would take en masse to help, to empower you all
Damn, you already gave me.
to perform services. I will be performing ceremonies on Thursday, which is Leap Day. We expect it to be a wedding palooza at our office because we already have 20 couples signed up and we're taking walk-ins. So I'm pretty excited. I'm going to perform 3 ceremonies on Thursday.
If you certified someone to do this,
Oh, if we deputize someone to be a deputy
Deputize.
commissioner?
is it only for within Contra Costa County? Is it statewide? Can you do it in other?
So there,
states?
we would, so not other states. I know that I'm empowered as Commissioner of Civil Marriages of Contra Costa. I can marry anybody within the state of California. But I'd have to look into the details, and it's all in the code. And for example, like I can't accept payment for performing a ceremony. I did a ceremony on top of Mount Diablo, and this couple was just ready to throw money at me like, no, 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 I'm a public servant. No, they said, buy your staff lunch. I said, I already did. Like, no, keep your money. And so I would be sure to get all of those details out to everyone so that everybody's operating in the,
I'm pretty sure you can.
Rules of
I've
the
done
road.
one in Santa Cruz.
Well,
So-
but I'm just saying, if my daughter wants to get married in Hawaii and you deputize me here, I can't perform
Nope,
the wedding.
doesn't
in
solve your
Hawaii.
problem for that, but congratulations.
You can, but she won't be married. There you go.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? No, thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
Very much.
And happy almost election day.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next item, please.
Item 7, deferred consent items, we have none. Item 8, unfinished business, there is none this evening. Item 9, new business. Item 9.1, resolution number 2024-029, authorizing mid-year 2023-2024 budget adjustments. Staff report by Kelly Sessions, Administrative Services Director.
You have the floor, Kelly.
Thank
Dazzle it.
you. Let
You
me,
got a tough act to follow.
I do. Not working here. Yeah. So good evening, Mayor Hudson, members of council. It's my pleasure to stand before you tonight to present the mid-year financial review. And let's do a quick review of the outline of what we're going to be looking at tonight. We will first review some key highlights of the report. We will look to the projected fiscal year-end results for 23-24. There are quite a few recommended adjustments to the budget that we will review. We'll take a very quick look forward to fiscal year 24-25, and then draw some conclusions from all of this. So first of all, key highlights. We started the fiscal year with policy reserves of 26.3 million. We're projected to end the fiscal year at 20.9 million in reserves, and that's prior to any of these additional adjustments that we may make to the budget. And we are projected to decrease fund balance by 5.4 million. Specifically to the general fund, our revenue is projected to come in at about 500,000 over the budget, above the budget. And our expenditures are projected to come in below budget by 800,000. If you look at the combined general fund and Doherty Valley Fund, again, the revenue is projected at about 500,000 above budget and expenditures at 1 million below the budget. So let's take a look at general fund revenues. The first set of bars represents the first 6 months of the fiscal year, so July 1 through December 31. The green bar represents actuals from last year. You can see that in the first 6 months, current year spending outpaced spending from last fiscal year.
Those are revenues, right?
Yes,
Not
I'm
spending.
sorry, I'm saying spending, yes. Outpaced revenue receipts in the current fiscal year by a little bit. The second set of bars represents the projection for the fiscal year end. Last year, we had receipts of 60.8 million in revenue. We're projected to end the fiscal year with 63 million in general fund revenue, and that is above budget. That brick area is the budget at 62.5, so about 500,000 over. And the reason for that is some increases in franchise fees and miscellaneous revenues, and that is offset somewhat by decreases in charges for service. Okay, we'll take a look at each of the revenue types, the first 6 months of the fiscal year. Property tax, you'll see, is a little bit coming in higher than it did last year. Sales tax is flat. The TOT, transient occupancy tax, that's the hotel tax, also at budget or flat with last year, I should say. Franchise fees, a little bit better than last year. Charges for service, a little better. Licenses and permits, a little better than last year. And miscellaneous revenues, slightly below what our receipts were last year in December. If we look at the full fiscal year, again, total of $63 million in revenue estimates. That is $500,000 or 0.9% above the adopted budget. Property tax is projected to come in at budget at $25.1 million. Sales tax projected at $13.3 million. We do have an update to that. I'll get into that a little bit later, but we will give you an updated number on that. Transient occupancy tax at budget. Same with franchise fees. You'll see their charges for service slightly below budget by about $200,000. Licenses and permits above budget by $500,000, and miscellaneous revenue at year end projected to be above budget by $200,000. Okay, property tax. Full year estimate is $25.1 million. Again, it's at budget, $600,000 above actuals from last year. And this year, we are experiencing a 4.1% increase in assessed property values. Unfortunately, that is not the highest in the county. It's towards the bottom of the county, but it is a very stable revenue source for us, and our largest revenue source for that matter. Sales tax, the full year estimate is $13.3 million. Originally projected to be at budget. That is significantly less than what it was last year, $1.1 million below last year's actuals. The reason for that is last year was such a banner year. It was just had a lot of pent-up demand from COVID, inflationary increases in a lot of the cost of goods. So last year, $14.3 million was a big year. As you'll notice on the asterisk at the bottom, and you know this, that reporting in sales tax lags behind several months. We have a consultant, Hinderleiter Delamas and Associates. They do our projections. This estimate was based on actuals from third quarter of 2023. Thursday afternoon, just before we had finance committee meeting, we received an update to those update to the actuals. So we got the December numbers in, and Hinderleiter had warned us at the beginning of the fiscal year that revenues would be flat in sales tax. They've now downgraded our projection by about $200,000. So now our year-end projection is going to be $13.1 million. We didn't present it here. We didn't want there to be confusion with the numbers, but that's where we stand with sales tax. TOT, full year estimate is $2.2 million, projected to come in at budget. That is about $100,000 above last year's actuals. As you all know, this is driven by hotel occupancy. And the San Ramon hotel industry is making a comeback. It's a slow, steady recovery from COVID, but it still is nowhere near what it was prior to COVID. 3.1 or 3.2 million in 2019. So we still have a long ways to go to catch up to pre-COVID times. Franchise fees, full year estimate, 5.7 million, projected to come in at budget. It's a little bit above last year's actuals. The growth of franchise fees is impacted by annexations, infill redevelopment and rates. And you all are probably also aware of the Zolly versus City of Oakland case, which is still unsettled, and that is regarding voter approval requirements for franchise fees. So all cities are watching this case to see what happens. We'll just monitor and hopefully we'll be able to continue to move forward with franchise fees as they are. Licenses and permits, well, your estimate is 3.8 million, $500,000 above budget and $500,000 above actuals for last fiscal year. That's a nice 14% increase. And this revenue is subject to the timing of development projects as they come in. So kind of, you don't exactly know where you're going to end up. It really depends on the construction and how things are moving in that regard. Charges for service, a full year estimate is 6.6 million. Again, this is the one category that is slightly below budget at 200,000. Still 600,000 above last year's actuals. I think we're still in somewhat of a recovery mode for COVID. This is subject to timing of development projects and also to the recreation offerings by Parks and Community Services. So here's what it looks like, general fund revenue by source. Each of these, you see here, we've got all of the different types of revenue. First column is the December numbers year to date compared to year-to-date numbers from last fiscal year. So we're 1.2 million above our receipts from last fiscal year. Our year-end estimate is 63 million compared to 62.5 million in budget. So we're projected to be $500,000 over budget, above our budget numbers. And that's a pretty good bump over last year's actuals of 60.8 million. Okay, let's move to the expenditure side. First 6 months of the fiscal year, you'll see in last fiscal year, we had actuals of 23.4 million. This year, our spending is above last year's actuals at 26.2. If we look at the full year expenditure results, last year, 51.8 million. We're projected to end this fiscal year at 59.1 million. And that is slightly below our budget of 59.9 million. So we're 2.8 million or 12% more than the same period from last year. One of the big drivers in this, in these results for the general fund are 25 vacant funded positions. And that's about a 9% vacancy rate. Our expenditure estimates for the full year. Expenditures total are 59.1 million. Again, 8.8 million, 800,000 below the budget. A little bit above last year's actuals. These expenditure results are driven by higher salary and benefit costs. If you recall the way we balanced our budget last year, we're reinstating our pension expense and also retiree medical costs and the increased cost of service contracts, just things going up naturally because of cost of living changes. All of those increases are naturally offset by the savings we have in the vacant positions. And on a department by department basis, which we'll see next, all departments are projected to end the fiscal year within budget. General government slightly above budget, but there is a budget request that we'll discuss that will bring them right into line with that. So here are the lineup of the different departments. The year-end estimate is here in this column, 59.1 million against the budget 59.9 million, difference of 0.8 And that is significantly more than last year's actuals. Again, because we added back in the cost of the pensions and the OPEB that we did not have last fiscal year. So let's take a look at our policy reserves. How do we get where we are? We started the fiscal year with policy reserves. As you know, our policy is a 36% reserve amount. We started the fiscal year at 26.3 million. We had revenues come in at 84.4 million against expenditures of 84.1 million. The net of transfers in and out of the general fund, we transferred out a whole lot more money than we brought in. So that shows up as a negative 5.7 to the fund. And then we have the net decrease in fund balance. So decrease in fund balance of 5.4 million. That leaves us with total reserves of 20.9 million. And still, that's a good place to be. We're at 39% of our reserve policy at that point. And we still have yet to discuss what the budget adjustments will be, the requests that are coming in. So let's go through all of the individual requests. We'll try not to belabor these too long. The city manager's office is asking for funding for a program, or asking to add a program manager position that would be responsible for the city's grant program and also the active sustainability program. The cost for that in the current fiscal year would be $23,606 with a targeted start date in June. So pretty much just 1 month worth of salary. The full cost to add that position is $283,000. You would see that when we present next year's budget. And of course, that would continue on after that. The cost for this, however, it will be offset by unfunding positions in other departments, as well as any new grant revenues that the program manager is able to bring in. There's a second request, and this is the reason why you look like you have a question
I'm
or a
just
comment.
smiling at Stephen.
Okay. The Community Priorities Survey and ongoing annual community survey to support city revenue measures 70,000. Those are necessary expenses to support the revenue measure, but they were unbudgeted at the fiscal year. And so this is the one thing that was putting the general government slightly over budget. The city clerk's office is asking for a new administrative coordinator to manage the Public Records Act requests, as well as the city's records and information management program. The cost for that in the current fiscal year would be $40,631 with a start date targeted in April. The full cost for next fiscal year will be $163,000 and ongoing after that. This cost, the cost of this new position will likewise be offset by unfunding positions in other departments. And just to give you an idea of the need for this, we included some information at the request of the Finance Committee on the growth of public records requests. You'll notice there, 2019, there were a total of 162 PRAs, 180 in 2020, and it just starts growing to 194 in 2021. And then I guess a word got out that we are really good at Public Records Act requests or something, and all of a sudden it spiked to 306, 305 last year, 56 through yesterday or today, probably yesterday, I guess, of PRA requests in the current fiscal year. So again, on track to actually eclipse the 305 number by who knows, maybe 10 or 20 or something. That last column there represents the amount of time that is spent managing all of these PRAs. And they just started, the city clerk's office just started to track that time in fiscal year 20 or calendar year 23. And they spent 458.5 hours doing that. So basically about 1.5 hours per PRA. And they've spent 60 hours so far.
Oh, so the left-hand column is calendar years.
I believe so, yes, correct?
Okay.
Yes.
Very
Calendar years. Okay. I should preface this by saying that all of these, the funding requests that we're looking at right now just pertain to the general fund. So we'll get into other funds in a minute, but all of this just hits general fund. Administrative Services Finance Department is seeking $15,000 to fund consulting services from Tyler Technology. As you know, it's also known as Munis. That is our ERP financial system. And that is to assist in implementing vendor self-service, electronic vendor payments, and e-procurement to improve efficiency and speed in the office. Also, a request for $75,000 to fund the Matrix user fee study. In Administrative Services HR Division, a request for $155,000 to fund higher than anticipated insurance premiums for vehicle insurance, property insurance, active shooter insurance, and cyber insurance. And then
Didn't I
additional,
read today that there were 2 cities
yes,
locally that were hit with ransomware?
Oakley, City of Oakley, and City of Pleasant Hill were both hit with ransomware last week. I think it was Thursday or Friday, actually on the same day. What I heard at that point was that they weren't sure if they were related or not. I don't know if they've made any, still don't know. I don't, yeah, they probably are, they're still figuring out. It sounds like Oakley got hit a little bit harder. Maybe they were less prepared. I don't know. Pleasant Hill is doing okay, but they're in the recovery mode. So it is just a matter of time. You know, they are hitting cities in Contra Costa County. Livermore was hit. I'm trying to think who else, but
Hayward?
Hayward
Hayward.
was hit as well.
Yeah.
So yes, we are doing what we can to protect the system.
So just we need to check with that cyber insurance, like we talked during finance committee meeting, if the ransomware is going to be covered or is it how that works?
yeah, that's what that cyber insurance is for.
So they'll cover the ransom amount also? Or only?
I would have to look at the details. I don't want to
Yeah.
speak without knowing the details of what the insurance would cover, but it is for ransomware attacks. There's a second request from the Human Resources Division to fund consulting services to assist with labor negotiations of $40,000. That also actually would cover other personnel consulting services like personnel investigations that they have to do related to various claims and that sort of a thing. In the Community Development Planning Division, $4,500 for mailing labels. Also $3,700 for increased fuel costs. This is for the contract with San Ramon Valley Unified for courier service. That's a new fee that they put on their service. $1,000 for postage machine supplies and other related items. And then funding the LAFCO fee for the Deerwood Road unincorporated island annexation, $5,000. Public Works Transportation Division. The request is to reclassify a senior administrative analyst position to an associate planner. This does not increase the FTE count, nor is there a cost differential for this change. The Public Works Public Services Division request to fund the cost increase for park restroom janitorial supplies of 5,000. Gas and electricity at various city facilities due to usage and rate increases, about 166,000. Funding the costs of increased pool chemicals, 77,000. And funding vehicle and equipment, fuel usage and increased costs for $40,000. Okay, still here in the general fund, Public Works, Public Services Division. Funding landscape maintenance at the Public Safety Complex of $2,148. And then funding the Sunridge Park, where we're anticipate accepting Sunridge Park this March, next month. And so there are requests totaling $291,460 for that maintenance of that park. That would include a maintenance supervisor position, 37,500 for just, March, April, May, June, so 4 months worth. And that would be the general fund portion. There's another portion that hits another fund. The full cost would be $113,000 in next fiscal year. And of course, that would include each year thereafter. A request to fund a maintenance technician position as well, same time frame, March through June, for $54,000. The full cost would be $162,000 next fiscal year and each year thereafter. Those new positions would likewise need some equipment. So a maintenance supervisor truck, $42,000, a maintenance technician truck of $65,000. Electric Toro for $24,000, gas and electricity expenses of $20,800, landscape maintenance of $17,881, water expense of $16,813, reactive maintenance of $1,500, janitorial supplies $2,633. And a second set or services, janitorial services for $2,633, janitorial supplies of $500, miscellaneous supplies $1,333, miscellaneous tools and supplies of $7,500. Again, all of that totals that number at the top, $291,460 for the current fiscal year. Okay, still in Public Works, Public Services Division, fund water usage and a rate increase at Athens Downs and the San Ramon Community Center for $18,723. Also, a request to fund repairs for auto accidents and vandalism of $11,170. The question was brought up in finance that yes, we should get some money back on vehicle repairs from the other party insurance if, depending on fault. So some of that increase or some of that funding could be offset. And then lastly, funding one-time non-routine cleanup and monthly landscape maintenance at Crow Canyon Gardens for $18,000. Okay, so now we're moving away from the general fund into all other funds combined, a total of 2.1 million. We will start with the city manager's office in the Street Smarts Fund. The request is to convert the administrative coordinator position from temporary to regular. The person's been in that position for many years. There's no additional cost to that. And the current fund balance in Street Smarts is $537,594. Community Development Planning Division, transfer revenue collected over the last 3 years from the Planning Cost Recovery Fund to the Tree Mitigation Fund. That's $9,400. The Microfilm Fund, $9,000, and the San Ramon Specific Plan Fund for about $3,600. So total there, $22,049. And there is a current balance in Planning Cost Recovery Fund of over $858,000. In Public Works, Public Services Division, Citywide Lighting Fund, the request is to fund some additional electric utility service for street lighting. That is due to increased usage as well as increased cost, 50,093. Again, a request to fund auto accident and vandalism repairs of 36,860. And then moving on to Doherty Valley Fund. One thing to recognize in this fund is that the general fund, as you know, subsidizes Doherty Valley. So when Doherty Valley Fund falls short, general fund comes to the rescue and picks up the whatever the shortage is. The request is for 201,587 to fund gas and electric service for street lighting, traffic signals, parks and facility maintenance. That is due to increased usage and rate increases. $60,000 for pool chemicals. $37,000. This is the other side of that, another side of that maintenance supervisor position, March through June. That's the Doherty Valley portion. The full cost is $113,000 in fiscal year 24-25 and each year thereafter. A request to fund additional water for various city parks due to usage and rate increases, $49,806. $3,500 to fund additional floor maintenance at the Amador Rancho Community Center, and $54,327 to fund auto accident and vandalism repairs, $13,750 to fund fence replacement at Chilentz and Alisma Court. And lastly, $5,000 to fund additional park restroom janitorial supplies. Okay, moving on to Public Works Engineering Division, the Geologic Hazard Abatement Fund. The request is to fund additional repairs for damage caused by the 2023 winter storms and repairs for any new damage that may occur in 2024. So far, knock on wood, fingers crossed, we haven't had anything major from that. Some of those costs are likely to be reimbursed by FEMA and Cal OES. The total request is $300,000. From the CIP fund, the request is $87,000 to fund traffic signal improvement and enhancements from the Transportation Development Act grant. $80,000 for vandalism repairs at Creekside Park restroom. And that's from the Park Development Fund. That's where there was that big fire that really caused a lot of damage. $31,211 to fund the Forest Home Farms sheep barn. And that funding would come from Infrastructure Maintenance Fund of $15,000 and also from the Historic Foundation Fund, an additional $16,211. A request of $10,000 to fund city facilities roof maintenance and replacement from the Infrastructure Maintenance Fund. And lastly, $25,000 to fund interior amenities renovation from the Infrastructure Maintenance Fund. Okay, still looking at other funds, Administrative Services HR Division, a request of $30,192 to fund the city wellness insurance premium from the Insurance Liability Fund. That was inadvertently left out of the budget during budget preparation. $13,127 to fund the Employee Assistance Program premium, also from the Insurance Liability Fund, for the same reason. And a shortfall of $813,000. So this is a big hit. This is to fund the general liability insurance premiums from the Insurance Liability Fund. This is what we pay to MPA, our pooling authority, and those costs can really change year to year based on experience ratings and that sort of a thing. And this year it was $813,000. So looking forward to next fiscal year 24-25, what are our key budget development drivers? First of all, we need to consider strategic cost reduction. How do we decrease our costs, keep costs within reason? We'll also be wanting to look at identifying new sources of revenue to fill any gaps that we would have from revenue to expense. We are hoping and working to get the sales tax revenue to come back to pre-pandemic levels. We recognize that transient occupancy tax, the new norm may be 2.2 million. That just may not come back fully. And then also, we have some encouraging news, our fee study results. The question was asked at Finance Committee about how much potential there is. We do have a kind of a preliminary number. If we were to raise all of our user fees to 100% cost recovery, and granted, we won't go there. That's not going to happen. But if we did, there's a potential for over $600,000 in new revenue to the city. So there is some opportunity there. And we'll be presenting that report in the next few months. And then as we all know, there's a lot of inflationary costs associated with labor expense. And also we'll be working to maintain service levels with the resources that we have. That's always an issue to struggle through. At our Finance Committee meeting, we had a robust discussion there, and Chair Perkins, I think, had a good question.
Outrageous, good. Well, yeah.
both-
Sridhar and I both
You
had
both had the same
questions
question.
about our debt schedule and our payment schedule, and we thought it was important that the whole council see.
Yeah, so I'm glad you both asked that question. This is good information. You'll see here that we have 5 debt obligations. These first 2 pension obligation bonds, we continue to make payments on those, about 1.4 million for the 2010s and 2.1 million for the 2021s. Those are going to be going for a long time. COP number 12, which was issued in 2011, this is one of the good news, the bright spots here. You'll notice, so in the current fiscal year, we have debt service payments of $491,150. After this fiscal year,
It's retired.
it's retired. It's gone. Yeah. So that one goes away in the current fiscal year. COP number 13, that was the 29 COPs. That one still has a long ways to go. But the other bright spot here is the LED lights.
LED lights is a bright spot.
There you
Oh,
go.
no. I told you it was only good. not-
Yeah.
2012 issued in 2012. After next fiscal year, so we have $130,000 payment next fiscal year, and then that one likewise is retired. So we're gonna pick up over $600,000 in the next 2 years of no debt service payments.
I thought it was important that all the council saw that we have 2, one that expires this year, one that expires next year, which has a net effect on our expenses of $600,000 over the 2-year period.
Yeah,
Good to
very,
know that
very
people are
important
making
to
decisions on mid-year.
remind
It
ourselves
is.
of
No,
that.
Yes.
This is important to know.
Yes.
And also we need to know that we are paying around $4 million, right? Is it like, how many $1 million we are paying for debt service every year?
Well, you look down at, 25, 26, 5.1 million,
5.1.
and then 5.1 million. And then you take the next one is 5 years worth, so divide 25 by 5 is
Yeah.
5.1 million. So,
Yeah,
we're gonna
these
be
are the
paying
annual
5.1 million for,
Roughly, yeah. As
yeah,
we-
for the next, 15 years.
Yeah, just plan on it. It's gonna be a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got something for it.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Well, we got
Yeah.
a
So
bridge and a whole bunch of other stuff.
We ready to move on?
Mhm.
A second question that came up at finance that I thought was also very telling and important for all of us to understand is where are we at with our PERS pension? This table here represents the number of employees that are enrolled in each of the various pension plans. So under tier 1 miscellaneous and safety employees, we have 101. Classic PERS employees, tier 2 classic, well, I don't think they call them classic, but tier 2 PERS employees, 34. PEPRA employees, 150. So this represents a real shift in the demographics of our city employees, given that now PEPRA employees outnumber the classic PERS employees. What does that mean? It means that we will certainly be reducing our PERS pension expenses going forward. The PEPRA employees, it's a reduced benefit and also a reduced cost to the city.
That also applies pretty much to our OPEB as well, doesn't it? Because of the.
Yes, well,
Megan, stick your head up here. You know, Megan, I'm sure is keeping close track of our OPEB. And there are certain groups in different categories. And our newest employees, we set up a savings account for them. And so that is effectively fully funded in real time. And
Correct.
so our demands on our PEPRA account, on our OPEB account, will decrease over time as we have retirees.
And Vice Mayor Perkins, to also continue to talk about the OPEB account, our recent actuarial with the OPEB was 89% funded.
Yes.
I believe that was at the finance.
Yeah.
Or yeah. And last year, the council did approve a drawdown on the OPEB account to help balance this year's budget. However, our windfall from last year is about the same amount. So we proposed not to do that drawdown because we're in the upper 80s. We
Yep.
don't, of course, want it to go lower. So this year that's another stone skip across the pond.
Yep.
With our budgeting where it was a happy incident for us to balance that out.
Yeah, we talked about in the finance committee, being in the upper 80s is less than 10% of the cities in the state of California have OPEB accounts that are 80% funded or better.
For districts.
So we're in great shape in that regard. And the ideal is, I know the GFOA and others will say, as low as 70% is good. I don't like 70%. I want to make sure it stays above 80%. But there's no good reason to have it go above about 90 or 95%, because that's just not money that's being used for the benefit of the citizens when you get above 95%. So to me, the sweet spot is 80% to 95% going forward.
yeah, I want to say our last actuarial report we enjoyed, I think it was over 100%.
Yes.
And then
The
this
stock
most
market?
recent one, lowered investment earnings, and more than anything, actually changes in the assumptions that went into the report. So really knocked us down to 87%. But
And at one point in
Right.
September, it was in the 70s.
right,
So that tells you how volatile the account can be. So even if we're at 110%, it may not be 110%
Right,
for
right.
long, depending on the market activity. But I believe we're still on track to be fully funded in 5 years.
yes,
Oh,
yes.
this year we got around 3 million from the investments, right? So,
And also, let's make sure we put that as a guideline between 80 to 90%, similar to our reserves, right, the target.
We could take that policy through the policy committee and have it adopted by the council if you want a
Yeah,
specific.
the finance committee ought to weigh in on that
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
I think it just did.
We'll make it official
They're listening
at a
to you.
finance committee meeting. Okay, so what can we conclude from all of this? Our general fund revenues are estimated to be about $500,000 above budget. General fund expenditures are estimated to come in at year end about 800,000 below budget. Even with those good numbers, our general fund is projected to end the fiscal year 23-24 with a net decrease to fund balance of 5.4 million because of all those transfers out that we do. And all of that happens despite the many position vacancies, the 25 position vacancies that we had in the general fund. So that's something for us to be cautious about and to be a little concerned. We need to monitor. Our expenditures still exceed our revenues when we include those transfers in and out. Additionally, as mentioned, our projected year-end fiscal reserve of 20.9 million is at the 39% reserve level. If council approves the entire 1.5 million in general fund and Doherty Valley Fund mid-year requests, then our projected reserves would drop to 19.4 million. And that brings us right back down to the 36% reserve level. And then the remaining 1.6 million in mid-year requests would be funded by other dedicated sources. Are there any additional questions that you may have?
Mr. Marisol, anything? Mark,
Yeah, I got a couple.
going back this.
No,
Go ahead.
There's one of the messages I want the city employees to hear in particular. And that is this council and the previous councils have always been very interested in ensuring that your pensions and your OPEB benefits and your salaries and all the benefits are fully funded. We find that it's important that everybody that works here feels that we honor them and we respect them, and we feel that we have an obligation to ensure that their participation in making this a great city is respected and funded. And so
Yes.
we want to see that you don't have to worry about making sure that the city of San Ramon and the city council is taking care of you. We want you to worry about your job and getting and serving the people of the city.
Absolutely, and that is appreciated. I know from staff, it is very much appreciated, so thank you.
I had a couple technical questions. I mean, first of all,
Fire away.
how often do we get visibility of like our share of the online sales and things, the revenue from online sales? I mean, how's that factored into,
sales
for
tax
example,
piece?
this
Yeah.
mid-year
We,
review?
the online sales piece comes through the county pool. We see that 4 times a year when Hinderleiter Delamas does their quarterly presentation to us.
Okay, so that's factored into all this
Yes. Mhm.
currently with as
Yeah.
revenue. Okay. And then I saw on there, there was a adjustment for landscape maintenance for the public safety complex. Do we have a feel for what maybe an annual cost might be for maintenance going forward?
I'll have to defer that one. Annual ongoing maintenance cost to the public safety complex. 12,000 for the year.
Comes a voice from the crowd.
Okay.
That would be John Bell, our
Oh, okay.
All
I
right.
thought maybe that was just a random voice from the crowd.
been a very knowledgeable resident.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me. I just was kind of curious on that. And then I saw the Street Smarts line entry there too.
Yeah.
Street Smarts was in Public Works before, wasn't it? Have you already moved it over to city manager's
Yes,
office? That's why it's kind of under your category.
it was moved over 2 years ago into the city manager's office.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, and also to note on that fund, not only do they have that fund balance of about 530,000, but we received an OBAG 3 grant that basically funds 80% of the program for 4 years. Plus, I believe we've identified other sources for that matching fund. So it's a very well-funded program. It seems, time that we say this particular position is no longer every 2-year contract. It should be a full-time position.
Okay. Now, yeah, I guess I'll just make some comments now before we,
Might as well.
yeah.
Like you want to hear from the public first.
Well, yeah, let's do that. We'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, I have questions.
Go ahead. You.
So I'm sorry, I just, I think I don't know who can answer this.
Sure.
So, what I wanted to understand is, so for this sustainability position, the manager, what will that entail? What would the roles and responsibilities entail there?
Sure. The overall position of the grant manager will be to not only seek out new grants and apply for grants for the city, but also assist other departments in managing and applying for grants. That will open up the time for engineers to do more engineering work, planners to do more planning, and overall grant coordination. We are putting in sustainability coordination right now, and that will be that responsibility will evolve over time, but at a minimum, this position will be responsible for gathering the information for all of our sustainability activities. That goes hand in hand with applying for grants and listing what we're doing, for some grant applications. And I think that would be the baseline for the sustainability portion of it. But whatever comes out of our climate action process and other directions from the council, we'll have to evaluate exactly what that position will do, or if we need additional positions to cover whatever duties. So that's kind of the overall summary of that position.
And when you talk about these, so the cost will be offset, but by unfunding positions in other departments and new grant revenues received, what are those positions that could potentially need to be filled in that time, anytime soon?
Well, we do have several positions that have been unfunded for a year, 2 years. Some positions that are on the books that we don't fund every year. We're in the middle of evaluating all of our vacant FTEs to see where we have movement. We do know that we have movement, and there may be other positions that open up where we shift those FTEs around. So we know at a minimum for the clerks and the grant manager position that we will have that capacity to shift some of the FTEs. It's a bit of a dynamic situation,
Yeah.
but we'll make sure to balance that for next year's budget.
And so for the purposes of what we're saying, the unfunded portion that we, in our calculation, is the 23,606, correct?
That is for this fiscal year, and that's why we're taking it to mid-year. With the approval tonight, we will have authorization to go forth and advertise for the program manager position, the clerk's position, and also the transportation planner position. With how recruiting and announcements and everything, that process, we're anticipating that we would be able to hire around June for the program manager. For the clerk's position, we may have an existing list that we can pull from. That's why it's a little bit accelerated. And the transportation planner as well would probably be around the May or June, but that's offset by the other position.
Okay, and then just a couple more questions. So how would this person work with a prospective sustainability advisory committee? Because if the budget that we had for that, if it does occur, was about 20,000 a year, which is far less expensive to be looking into these opportunities for us. And this is obviously, a lot more expensive, right, for the city. So I'm just wondering, how will they be working with the committee? Or are we now talking about double tasking? In some way?
No, we would have to figure out how we staff that committee. It may be a portion of this person's time. I think a committee of that nature would involve multiple departments, at least initially, and that 20,000 estimate is a rough estimate of what it costs to operate a committee for a year. And that's multiple, even department heads showing up and presenting to a committee. So that's where that 20,000 comes from. But this position would be primarily focused on applying for grants citywide across all departments, notifying departments about grants, hopefully, and no pressure to whoever may fill this position, hopefully pay for itself.
Yeah.
With, receiving certain grants.
And do you think that we will be able to offset the basically the cost of hiring this person with the grants that they may be able to bring in?
That's the hope. In our approach to any new position, we're taking it from a standpoint that the position should be either, regulatory in nature, or I should say, help comply with regulatory requirements, where if we don't
Mhm.
fill it, then we'd be at risk of, not meeting our PRA deadlines or other deadlines. Or, if the position generates new revenue,
Mhm.
that's what we're pitching at mid-year. We do have the positions with the parks. With parks maintenance, the reason why we're presenting those positions is if we don't have those positions, we're going to be having a service level reduction across all of our parks, trying to fill it in there. So really, I should say at this point, there are three, either regulatory compliance, new revenue, or service levels that we're looking at in this particular mid-year. We'll probably take that approach for the budget coming up, but we really don't know where we're at yet. We're still gathering all that information.
Okay, great. Because the only concern I want to make sure is that, somehow we are offsetting those, like, we expect to offset the additional cost of this new position
Yeah.
in some capacity. Not just through transferring funds, but in
Yes.
absolute terms, you expect to bring comparable amount of grants and money back into the city to pay that
Sure.
position.
It may not be on an annual basis. You
Mhm.
could, receive $1 million grant, and that's not, that's spread out over, the years of the service. And there may take some ramp up time for this position as well. So trying to set expectations, but it could be a new source of revenue bringing in grants.
So when we've historically done things on a contract basis, usually that comes out, I'm assuming it's much more expensive.
I am not aware of any contract grant writers that we've
So we
employed
can't,
in the
yeah, exactly.
past.
So like
Yeah.
we can't hire somebody on a as needed basis if we want somebody to look into
No.
it.
And, at least in discussion with some cities that have hired contract grant writers, you really need that staff member behind the grant that can advocate for it and knows the ins and outs of everything that's going on in the city. I'm not saying that this person will know every grant like that, but they will know the staff members to coordinate with, and those grants typically score better. And also, you're applying for more realistic grant opportunities instead of just applying to apply.
Yeah, they'll be kind of coordinating all of that. That's what you're saying. Okay, great. Thank
Yep.
you.
Is that all the questions? We'll open up public comment.
Yeah.
Do
I
we have
have
any?
one question.
Go ahead.
I remember Candice updated on this one about do we have guidelines on our debt service, the percentage that we can have with our general fund?
The percentage of debt.
Much we can go for debt service based on,
We don't have a policy as such, is my recollection.
or is there any
It's been
general?
20 years, but the GFOA might have a recommended.
Practices.
I'm aware of such policies. We do not have one. We can certainly take a look at that.
Yeah, that will be great. Yep. Thank you. That's all. Mike.
Okay, do we have any cards to speak on the mid-year? Okay. Anyone want to rush up here and speak on the mid-year review? Then we'll close the public comment period and it matters before the council.
I'll move the resolution 2024-029.
Do I have a
I
second?
second.
We have a motion, Perkins, second for Rose. Let's put any further discussion.
Yeah, well, I just wanted
Yeah.
to, make a comment that, kind of seen this all play out in the mid-year review and the way you briefed it. I think we're really seeing in some of these numbers, the impact of kind of the economy, there's a lot of things here that reflect increases in cost for supplies and utilities and vehicles and fuel maintenance, insurance costs. And then there's some things that, vandalism, vehicle accidents, those kinds of things, or personnel costs, some of the administrative corrections, that all kind of makes sense to me. And it seems reasonable. And I'm pleased that we're kind of staying within the reserve policy. It just seems
Mhm.
like you're right there on the, right on the money
Right on the
there.
edge.
Every year.
But it, it looks like it's getting tighter as well. But we are able to make some adjustments. I do support the adjustments. Even, as we see these higher costs and things like that, I don't think it's going to get any better going into the future. And I think as we kind of look long-term as far as what our long-term vision is with kind of building out the city core area and meeting our housing requirements, we're going to have more people. There's going to be more demand on our streets and our parks and trails and police services and everything else. And so I think it's really going to be important as we kind of go into future budgeting years that we kind of anticipate what the future demographics are going to be. We don't know what those demographics will be yet, but we need to start anticipating some of that stuff. And not, is it younger kids, or older people, families, commuters, what's that going to look like as we sort of build out? And then how do we adjust in our budgeting process? Because I think we need to start, this is decades worth of effort that's going to go into kind of a new San Ramon look. And I think we need to kind of start thinking about that now as we kind of go through the budgeting process. So it's a little bit early. This is just the mid-year. I get that, but I think that's something to kind of keep in mind that things are going to be changing in San Ramon over the next couple of decades. We got to think about that.
Right. Maintaining service levels.
And
It's
absolutely
gonna be
maintaining
really
service levels.
difficult to
Yeah.
continue to
And
do.
finishing Crook Canyon.
So,
Along Mark's, the $800,000 in increased insurance costs, the citizens of San Ramon are not gonna see a whole lot of direct benefit of that. We have to maintain our insurance. But boy, that's a hit that is kind of hidden from everybody. But we're seeing insurance costs, whether it's automobile, whether it's property insurance. I
everywhere.
don't think there's a single category of insurance that's holding steady.
It's insurance costs and also inflation. We're affected by inflation just like everybody else is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a real big step on insurance. Yeah. Well, there you go. Everybody vote yes?
And
Okay.
it looks like a 5-0. Hit the
There
blue
you
button
go.
again.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Next item, please.
Item 10, city manager and city council members' comments and matters initiated.
Good.
All
City
right.
Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I have one quick and one not so quick update. The quick update is everybody in the city should be receiving this city update in the mail. I'd like to point out, if you see the large oak tree and city update with City of San Ramon, this is not junk mail. Please open it. Please read it. And inside there is a survey that you can either scan the QR code or fill out and mail back to us about community priorities. So I wanted to mention that to keep on the lookout for that if you haven't received it already. And then the second update that I have is a little bit lengthier, and I wanted to make sure that the public was fully aware that earlier this month, the city received an application to construct an all-affordable project on the Morgan's Masonry property. This is the first project application we have received that is subject to Assembly Bill 1397, which went into effect on January 1st, 2018. The bill amended the state's housing element law, providing, among other changes, a ministerial approval process for projects on specific sites that provide at least 20% affordable units to lower income households. You may have heard of these projects referred to as uses by right. Debbie Chamberlain, our Community Development Director, recently provided the City Council and the Planning Commission with a memo outlining the use by right process, which is different from the policy that was adopted last year by the Council for processing SB 330 housing projects. The new law states that use by right means the city may not require a conditional use permit, planned unit development permit, or other discretionary local government review or approval for affordable housing projects that meet the criteria. In other words, the city has no discretion to deny such a project. For these AB 1397 projects, staff can only enforce the objective criteria in its building and zoning codes, but we can enhance transparency and keep the public informed. The Community Development Department has modified our pending housing project webpage to include a section for by right housing projects. This allowing subscribers to receive updates on these projects. If you go to our website under the hot topics section, we do have our pending development projects page, and you'll see that by right. So you can, we notice it just like we do any other development, but you will see all the details about the development there, or you can search on our website and enter pending projects, and it should pop up as the first item. Again, this is the first AB 1397 project to come in, but we do expect to see very few submitted over the next few years. So I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. It is a different project that complies with new state housing laws. As you know, the state legislature proposes over 2,000 bills every year. A good portion of those are housing laws that we keep track of, but we can expect more and more housing laws to be passed through the state. So with that, that concludes my update for this evening.
Marisol? Yeah.
Yep. So mine's a short review this time. So on the 20th, February 20th, I attended the teen council. Did have a chance to tell them about the climate action task force that we're working to recruit. Very excited. I let them know they were hoping there was more youth positions, but I let them know we still haven't, the at-large and alternate positions therein. I think one of the questions, and it's been answered. I will confirm with defer to the city manager to confirm, but many of them were wondering if they themselves could participate. But as I recall, I will, just to make sure, I believe they can.
Yeah, and also with the city clerk, I believe if they are on the teen council, we only have one. We don't have dual memberships on dual committees.
Right.
So yeah, that's correct.
So I want to make sure to put that out just in case they're listening and they have that information, so everybody knows what the requirements are. So a lot of interest on that, and they're definitely going to pass the word on to their friends. Then we had the Parks and Community Services Commission and the Arts Advisory Committee had a special joint meeting on February 21st. And we were discussing really sort of what the vision is for San Ramon and arts throughout the city. And it was actually very exciting. There's a lot of, there was things about having interactive art. I know it sounds really unusual, but you're using your cell phone and it's like you're seeing things in 3D. It's just so many really cool ideas out there. I mean, I hope we get to see most of this. But very future forward looking. I love the interactive part because it's just, it really is about engaging young people and families, and, they're learning while they're enjoying the art throughout the city. So looking forward to seeing that unfold. And that's about it. Thank you.
Sridhar or Mark?
Yeah, all right, I'll go next. Back on the 15th, I was privileged to be able to attend the kickoff event for the next Community Academy, formerly known as the Citizens Police Academy, I guess, when I took it. Good crowd, a big crowd, and it was interesting to hear everyone kind of going around the room telling about why they signed up for the class. Everybody's got a different reason, but looks like a really good class just kicking off. Then on the 18th, along with Mayor Hudson and Councilmember Rubio, I was at the Lunar New Year celebration over at City Center. This is the Year of the Dragon. They had the rain held off. It was a pretty good crowd there, and good dances, good music, some incredible strength and balance activities, and really engaging changing face show that was really neat. Then last week on Wednesday, I attended a community meeting. There was about 20 or so residents over on the west side. This is a residence up on Century Oaks Court that kind of butts up against county and unincorporated property. And they were expressing some concerns about just kind of living on the seam between the county and the city. And we had County Supervisor Anderson was there, one of the sheriffs from the Valley Station, as well as Chief Carlson attended the meeting. I think the residents appreciated having that meeting take place. I also attended on Friday the Chamber of Commerce Business Roundtable again. Our Deputy City Manager, Scott Cole, was there, gave another update on some things going on in the city. And then the primary program was really about setting up retirement programs and focused on small businesses. Let's see, on the 24th, so on Saturday, I was over at Doherty Valley High School. There was a volunteer recognition event. This is all in conjunction with the Lunar New Year celebration, kind of the end of the Lunar New Year. They celebrate a lantern festival. This is hosted by Ivy Max Academy, and just some great presentations, some music, as well as some students getting up and talking about some of the volunteer work that they've been doing in places like Kenya and Costa Rica and Nepal and China. So a nice celebration, and punctuated by sticky rice balls, which is, I guess, a tradition at the end of the Lantern Festival. And then yesterday I attended the Iron Horse Corridor Management Program Advisory Committee meeting. Our very own Chris Weeks was there. He gave a update on the Bollinger Canyon Iron Horse Trail Overcrossing project. And then we talked about, as kind of a main agenda item, this program, management program, has been in place for about the last 27 years. And it's been implemented under the foundation of 6 elements, kind of like we have elements in our our general plan and things like that. Well, there's 6 elements, but back in 2019, there was a Assembly Bill 1025 was passed that basically forgave the county of the state funds that they owed back to the state for the acquiring the Iron Horse Trail. So this is a long time ago, but so the county was forgiven of that. They were also relieved of any county requirement to put in, they kind of referred to it as bus lanes, I guess, down the Iron Horse Trail. It's just that's never really going to happen. They were forgiven of that requirement, but they were required to create a new element, a 7th element, and that was to address the evolving mobility modes of transportation along Iron Horse Trail. So there was a very brief draft of what this element would look like. We're going to continue to work on that draft over the next couple meetings. And then it will ultimately kind of go to the County Transportation, Water and Infrastructure Committee and on to the Board of Supervisors. But one of the things that came out during that discussion was there's really probably a need for some kind of a master plan for the kind of the future use and development of the Iron Horse Trail. What's it going to look like? There's going to be areas where some areas are real wide, some areas are real narrow. What's the consistency there? Where do you kind of start with improvements? Is it going to be separate lanes for, bicycles and scooters and things like that, and pedestrians over here? Will they build a new lane? What about all the infrastructure that's impacted? So there's a lot of things to consider. But they're looking at maybe getting some kind of a master plan started to kind of evolve the Iron Horse Trail into the future as we were talking about building out the city core and the impact, the increased usage of the Iron Horse Trail just from that. And getting to transit, getting to retail, we've got our schools along there, we got new residential right along there. So it's going to be at max capacity. And so they're going to have to evolve what the trail usage is and how it gets done. So anyway, that was a very interesting meeting yesterday. That's it.
And I would just say, fortunately, there is a master plan that East Bay Regional Park District has. So they'll probably have to change that, but they have the maintenance license on it. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
part of this
Yeah,
committee.
Walnut
as
Creek
well.
loves to plan on this
Yeah.
stuff, like they're gonna do a master plan that including our landscaping. But I'm glad you're going to that. That has been around for a long time. It's got me started in all this. I would just say I have nothing to report other than that we kicked off Government 101 last night. And we'll see where that goes. Okay, next item, please.
Whoa, you got two guys over here.
Oh, I asked you guys first. Okay, go
You
ahead.
asked Marisol first.
Sridhar or Scott?
Go
What do you
ahead,
got?
Sridhar.
Mine is much shorter. So on February 15th, attended Transportation Advisory Committee. Committee reviewed draft of traffic signal warrant analysis for Windermere Parkway and Holborn Way technical memorandum. Thanks to our transportation department, Deborah and the whole team, Chris for actually, first of all, performing a comprehensive analysis on the request and whether the traffic signal permits there within that intersection. So thanks for sharing and answering all the questions that residents raised during that meeting. It was well-attended residents meeting, I guess, for transportation committee meeting. And it is interesting to know that there are 9 items or the warrants that were picked up as per study, and based on that, you provided pretty good suggestions and recommendations that can go in that intersection so that we can enhance the safety and security of that road. So I'm looking forward, and also residents are looking forward for those improvements. Thanks for that. And also we got verbal update on bike master plan. And then that's for transportation committee. And then Thursday, 22nd, we attended Chair and Vice Mayor Perkins. We both attended finance committee meeting. The
Way
same
too
thing
much
that
fun.
maybe. So we pretty much asked most of our questions during that time. So we didn't have that many today. So, but it was a good refresher for us. So those are the two. That's pretty much from my side. Thank you.
I had 4 pretty substantial meetings. Marin Clean Energy, I'm the representative on the MCE board. And they issued a $1.03 billion bond to prepay 5 of our power purchase agreements, which will yield a $7 million savings per year on the purchase of that power. So that actually drops right down to the ratepayers and all. We will have an open season in early March where we put out a call for power purchase agreement proposals in wind, geothermal, and solar. And in every case, we will always have some kind of storage associated with it because particularly on solar, the middle of the day power kind of overwhelms the system. The demand is low. Well, the demand compared to the availability of power is low. And so we put that excess power into storage. PG&E has done a couple of rate increases. MCE is proposing no rate increase for this next fiscal year. The rates that we're currently collecting are sufficient to cover the cost of doing business and buying the power. So that was MCE. EBRCSA, East Bay Regional Communications System Authority. That's the radio system for all the first responders in Alameda and Contra Costa County. That's the police and fire and some others. We have negotiated a master license agreement with BART. We have a new MOU with Milpitas, Menlo Park, Fremont for mutual aid because some of those are right at the boundary. And so they need to be able to use some parts of our radio system, and we need to be able to use some parts of theirs. The encryption is moving along. That's a privacy issue that police can't say, I've got a name of somebody, an address and a license number. That's all private information. They have to do it through encryption. The Wiedemann site up on the Wiedemann Hill related to the Faria development is done and ready to be turned over. So that's, and there was a large outage in the central Contra Costa that lasted about 5 hours. We had some lessons learned with that and how to manage that. CCTA, that's the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. The bridge is actually slightly ahead of schedule, but they weren't willing to say what the new occupancy date is. We spoke a little bit about the Gomentum Station. The Concord Naval Weapons Station right now is a site that is being used by more than a dozen car companies for testing vehicles. And they're looking to expand that going forward. And then that was the big issues there. We had a meeting with the San Ramon Valley Unified School District. Dr. Malloy, the superintendent, will be moving on to a new job at the National Association of Superintendents. And so they will be doing a national search. They have two parcel tax issues. In fact, the county clerk mentioned them, measures E and F. That election takes place on May the 5th, I think it was. May 7th. May 7th, okay. E is essentially a renewal of the existing parcel tax. And F is there was some supplemental funds they got over the last 3 years that allowed them to introduce some new programs. And F would allow them to continue those existing programs going forward. They're working on their long-range facility master plan, which will likely lead to a future bond issue. They're also working on policies regarding artificial intelligence and usage on campus. Cal-High bleachers and press box is being replaced, and they're doing playground equipment at Bollinger Canyon, Walt Disney, Neil Armstrong, and then fencing at Cal-High, Monte Vista High, Quail Run, and Hidden Hills. And that's my report.
Okay. Next item, please.
Item 11, closed session. 11.1, convene a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 59457 to perform the evaluation of the city manager.
Okay. City manager, what's his name?
We ought to ask about public comment if there's
Oh,
any.
yeah. I'm sorry, is there anybody wishing to speak to public comment on this item before we go into closed session? Do we have any cards? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comment.
Thank you.